This is Mermaid Man from SpongeBob, and today I'm going to talk about whether his powers could actually be possible. But in order for us to fully understand him, we need to go back to where Mermaid Man started, his origin, the origin episode. The episode starts out with SpongeBob and Patrick getting excited about a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy TV marathon, but when a power outage spoils their fun, they decide to go and visit the two heroes themselves. It starts when Mermaid Man is a very young man, and he's at the beach. He goes swimming, but is swept out to sea by a huge whirlpool. A friendly mermaid gives him a starfish so that he can breathe. Wait, no, not that kind of starfish. The signature purple one that he's always wearing. But let's talk about that for a minute. Could a starfish really allow him to breathe? Let's assume for a minute that this starfish could somehow separate the hydrogen and oxygen molecules that are in the water. But as you can see from the pie chart here, he needs more nitrogen than oxygen to breathe because he is a human. And there is no nitrogen underwater. So where would he get his needed nitrogen to live? And as we know, oxygen causes rust, and it also deteriorates the body, which then would mean that he could not live to be nearly as old as he has in this show. So as of now, it's not looking too good for those of you who wanted to prove Mermaid Man's powers to be true. But let's continue on a little bit farther, shall we? And so here we come to the first of Mermaid Man's powers, per se. So it's the water ball, right? Could you actually throw a water ball? Well, judging on how he does it, it doesn't look that way. Okay, so the human body is made up of 70% water. So it sort of makes sense where he could get the water. But then again, we must bear in mind where that water exactly comes from in the body. It's not like you just have random pockets of water all over your body. That water is actually in use for very good reasons. So as you can see, there really isn't very much extra water to be found. But let's pretend that doesn't matter. Let's say he's some weirdo who does have random pockets of water in his body, and he didn't die. Because I'll tell you right now that if he expelled that much water that quickly from his body, he would die. Without the water in your body, you die pretty fast. Since we're continuing down our hypothetical path, we're naturally brought to the famous equation, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Now I don't know about you, but I think the speed of light is a pretty large number. So that means the smallest of items have quite massive amounts of energy. Thus, the amount of energy needed to propel that water forward and actually do damage to the enemies is kind of impossible for a human. Now, I'm not a big fan of impossibility, so we're going to keep going down this hypothetical path, even though the subtraction sentence has proven that his odds of being able to summon that much energy are very slim. Now, granted that you would expect SpongeBob to live pretty deep underwater, given the creatures he lives with, such as Squidward, who is a squid. Squids don't live on the shallow end, you know. So since he lives so deep underwater, even the smallest of disturbances at his level will greatly affect the water surface, potentially creating tsunamis or rip currents. A tsunami every single time Mermaid Man hurls a water ball at the dirty bubble would be a huge problem. So I think we're going to have to abandon the idea that Mermaid Man's water balls could actually exist. But let's move on to a different power, shall we? Mermaid Man's belt, the center of the very well-beloved SpongeBob episode, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4. It was the center of the very popular joke, Wombo, where Patrick turns the M for Mermaid Man around and says it's W for Wombo. Ring a bell now? What I wouldn't give to have Mermaid Man's belt. Because it shrinks people. I mean, how cool is that? And then all those other buttons, who knows what it does? But the downside is, it's kind of hard to figure out how to get people back to their normal size. But anyway, this is a segue into my next point. Once again, another impossibility is in our way of proving Mermaid Man's powers to be possible. Is it possible to shrink something, or someone? Well, maybe scientists are doing a lot more secret research than I'm aware of, but I don't think so. Because it would involve a great deal of rearranging molecules, and once they were all put back together again, I don't think that that person would ever be the same. The law of conservation of energy stands in our way as well, because Mermaid Man making a water ball is no problem, because that's energy from himself being expelled into the open water or at a target. No problems there. But when it comes to the shrink ray, there is a problem. Now, of course, even if the shrinking did work, the object would not have the same energy as it did before. The problem isn't with the shrinking, it's with the shrink ray itself. Of course, there are some objects in existence that have massive amounts of potential energy, almost unfathomable amounts. But an extreme amount of kinetic energy would be needed to shrink something because of all the particle rearrangement it involves. So unfortunately, science says that Mermaid Man's powers could not exist. But we can't help but love him anyway.